Don't touch her. My voice came out thinner than I meant it to, barely louder than the heart monitor beside my bed. My mother's hand froze over my daughter's bassinet. She looked at my shaking arms, the IV taped to my wrist, the blood pressure cuff still wrapped around me, and smiled like my weakness proved her point. "We are taking our granddaughter home," Mom said. "You're too unstable to raise her." My father stood behind her with a leather folder tucked under his arm, dressed like he was going to a business lunch instead of invading my hospital room. He didn't ask if I was in pain. He didn't ask if I had slept. He just looked at my newborn daughter and said, "This doesn't need to become ugly, Trisha." But it already was. I was 24 years old, 2 days past an emergency delivery, still so sore I could barely sit upright without seeing white spots. My baby Lily was curled beneath a pink blanket, making tiny breathy sounds in her sleep. And my parents were standing over us like I was the danger. Mom glanced toward the half-open door, where nurses passed by in the hallway. "She's been crying non-stop," she said louder, refusing visitors, acting paranoid. "We warned the staff this might happen." My face burned. "Crying," I whispered. "I almost died giving birth." Mom's eyes narrowed. "See," she said, "that tone, that instability." Dad opened the folder. "We've spoken with administration," he said. "There are forms." I pushed myself higher against the pillows and instantly regretted it. Pain tore through my abdomen and I gasped. Mom used that second. She reached down and lifted the edge of Lily's blanket. "No," I said. My voice cracked. Mom leaned closer, her perfume sharp and expensive. "Everyone knows you've always been fragile," she whispered. "Don't make us embarrass you more than we have to." That was when Nurse Mara walked in. She took in the room in one glance. My mother's hand on the bassinet, my father's folder, my face, Lily's tiny body between them and me. "Step away from the infant," Mara said. Mom straightened. "This is a family matter." Mara didn't look at her. She looked at me. "Trisha," she said calmly, "do you want them to leave?" My throat locked. For a second I could hear my mother's voice from 100 old arguments. "Don't be dramatic. Don't make a scene. No one will believe you." Then Lily made a soft sound in her sleep. "Yes," I whispered, "I want them to leave." Mom laughed once, cold and short. "You hear that?" she said. "She's proving exactly what we told you." Mara walked to the computer beside my bed. She didn't argue, she didn't raise her voice. She typed one note into the system, clicked once and stepped back. Dad frowned. "What did you just do?" Mara stayed silent. For a moment, nothing happened except the steady beep of my monitor. Then footsteps approached fast. 2 hospital security officers appeared in the doorway less than 2 minutes later. Mom's mouth curved into a satisfied smile, like she thought they had come for me. Mara turned toward her and said, "Do you know who runs this hospital?" For the first time since she entered my room, my mother's smile disappeared. Mom recovered almost instantly. She turned toward the security officers with the wounded expression she used at church fundraisers, the one that made people rush to comfort her before they knew what happened. "This nurse is being manipulated," Mom said. "My daughter is not well. She's confused, exhausted, and emotionally unstable." Dad stepped forward, blocking half the doorway like he belonged there. "Trisha has a long history of emotional episodes," he said. "We're only trying to make sure the baby is safe." The baby. Not Lily. Not my daughter. Just the baby. My fingers curled around the hospital blanket. Mara glanced at the monitor beside me. The beeping had gotten faster. "Mrs. Bennett," she said, "step away from the bed." Mom didn't move. Instead, she leaned down close enough that only I could hear her. "You know what happens when you fight us," she whispered. "People believe us." My stomach tightened harder than the incision pain. Because she was right. When I was 15 and told my aunt I wanted to live with my grandmother for the summer, Mom told everyone I was acting out. When I was 19 and chose community college instead of the program Dad picked, he told relatives I was spiraling. Every time I said no, they gave my no a diagnosis. And people stopped asking me what really happened. It had started again the day I told them I was pregnant. Mom had stared at the test like I'd handed her a death notice. "This is a disaster," she said. Dad had been calmer, which somehow felt worse. "We'll handle everything," he told me. "Move back home, no more apartment, no more questionable friends, no major decisions without us." I said I wanted to raise my child myself. From that moment, they stopped treating me like a daughter and started treating me like a problem to be managed. Back in the hospital room, Mara's voice cut through the memory. "Mrs. Bennett, this is your final warning. Step away from the patient." Mom straightened and pointed at the monitor. "Look at her heart rate," she said. "She's agitated." I swallowed against the dryness in my throat and forced the words out slowly. "I am tired," I said. "I am recovering. I am not giving you my daughter." For the first time, Dad's jaw tightened. He opened the leather folder and pulled out 2 papers. "One is a temporary guardianship statement," he said. "The other confirms Trisha requested psychiatric observation if staff felt she was impaired." Mara took the papers without touching his hand. I stared at the bottom line. My name was there. Trisha Bennett. The letters leaned the way mine did. The T had the same sharp cross, but I had never signed it. "That's not mine," I said. Mom sighed. "She says that because she doesn't remember." Mara's expression changed. Not fear, not confusion, recognition. She looked at Dad. "Where did you get these forms?" Dad's eyes flicked to the computer, then back to her. "From someone who understands this hospital better than you do." The moment Dad said that, the air in the room changed. One security officer stepped closer. "Sir," he said, "we need you and Mrs. Bennett to move into the hallway." Mom's head snapped toward him. "Absolutely not," she said. "My daughter is unwell and this hospital is letting her endanger a newborn." Her voice carried past the doorway. A nurse at the station looked up. A young resident slowed in the hall. 2 visitors near the elevator turned their heads. And suddenly, Mom had exactly what she wanted. An audience. She stepped into the hallway but kept her body angled toward my room, making sure every word could reach me. "I am her mother," she said. "I know what she looks like when she's unstable." I lay trapped in the bed, unable to stand. Unable to follow, hearing strangers go quiet outside my door. Dad handed the folder to one of the security officers. "Call an administrator," he said. "We have documentation and we have already contacted Child Protective Services." My breath caught. Mara turned sharply. "You contacted CPS." Mom lifted her chin. "We had to," she said. "Trisha threatened to disappear with the baby. We couldn't take that risk." "That never happened," I said from the bed. But my voice barely reached the hallway. Dad continued like he hadn't heard me. "We know several people on this hospital's donor board," he said. "This can be resolved cleanly, or it can become very embarrassing for everyone involved." Mara did not flinch. She walked to Lily's bassinet and locked the wheels with her foot. Then she positioned herself between my daughter and the door. "Nina," she called to another nurse, "stay with Trisha." A second nurse entered and stood beside my bed. Mara took the papers from security and scanned them into the computer system. For a few seconds, the room was quiet, except for the scanner pulling the pages through. Then a red alert appeared on the screen. Mara's face went still. She looked at Dad through the doorway. "Mr. Bennett," she said, "repeat exactly who gave you these documents." Dad's mouth opened. Nothing came out. Mom noticed the pause and changed tactics instantly. Her voice softened for the people watching. "We love our daughter," she said. "She's confused from the medication. She doesn't understand that we're saving that baby from chaos." Then she looked straight through the open doorway at me. "You'll thank us when you're stable again." My hands were shaking, but my mind suddenly cleared. "Mara," I said, "check the consent records from last night." Mara turned back to the computer. She clicked once, then again. Her face hardened. She closed my hospital room door, cutting off my mother's performance mid-sentence. Then she pressed a second alert and spoke to security through the glass. Do not let either of them near the infant. Mom struck the closed door once with her palm. The sound cracked through the room, sharp enough that Lily startled in her bassinet. Open this door, Mom demanded from the hallway. You cannot lock a mother away from her own daughter. A security officer answered immediately. Step back, ma'am. For the first time, no one in the hallway sounded unsure. I could see pieces of them through the narrow glass panel beside the door. Mom's shoulders were stiff. Dad was whispering fast, one hand gripping her elbow. The same people who had looked at me like I was dangerous were now watching security keep my parents away from my child. Inside the room, Mara lowered her voice. Trisha, I need you to stay calm and listen carefully. Nina moved closer to my bed, not touching me just there. Mara pointed to the computer screen without turning it fully toward me. Someone accessed your patient file last night without authorization, she said. A consent note was uploaded. It claims you agreed your parents could make medical and childcare decisions if staff considered you emotionally impaired. My mouth went dry. That's impossible. It was attempted, Mara said, not approved. The pieces started arranging themselves in my head. Dad's folder. Mom's certainty. The way they arrived like everything had already been decided. And then I remembered. Mom had taken my phone while I was half awake after delivery. I'm texting relatives for you, she'd said, smiling as I drifted in and out. Dad had stepped out near the nurse's station for a long call, his voice low, his back turned toward my room. Mara pulled up a new form and looked directly at me. I need to ask you clearly, with Nurse Nina as witness. Did you authorize Diane or Harold Bennett to speak for you, make decisions for you, or remove your daughter from this hospital? My hands stopped shaking. No, I said, I did not authorize them to do anything. Nina documented my answer. Mara entered it into the system. The second she saved it, the room seemed to shift around me. Security moved closer to the hallway door. A pediatric nurse came in quietly and rolled Lily's bassinet farther from the entrance, closer to my bed. Mara picked up the phone. Contact hospital legal, she said, and page the on-call administrator now. Outside, Mom's voice dropped, but the glass carried enough of it through. It's falling apart, she said into her phone. You said this would be handled. Dad grabbed for her wrist. Diane stopped talking. But above them, the black dome of the hallway security camera stared down without blinking. Less than a minute later, footsteps approached with a different kind of authority. A man in a dark suit rounded the corner, followed by hospital legal staff. He was not a floor manager. He was not someone Mom could intimidate with a donation or a last name. Malcolm Reyes, the hospital's chief operations officer, stopped outside my door. He looked through the glass panel. At me. Recognition crossed his face immediately. Mom saw it too. Her mouth parted but no sound came out. Malcolm opened the door just wide enough to step into the hallway between my parents and my room. Mrs. Bennett, he said, before you say another word, you need to understand whose room you are standing outside. Mom blinked at Malcolm like she hadn't heard him correctly. Excuse me, she said. Malcolm didn't raise his voice. He didn't need to. He stood in the hallway with hospital legal behind him, security on both sides of my parents, and Nurse Mara just inside my room beside Lily's bassinet. This is Trisha Bennett's room, Malcolm said. Majority owner of the Bennett Lawson Health Foundation, controlling foundation for this hospital network, and silent chair of the Patient Safety Board. The hallway went completely still. Dad's face changed first. Not confusion. Recognition. He knew exactly what Malcolm meant, even before Mom did. Mom gave a short laugh. That's ridiculous, Trisha doesn't run anything, she can barely handle. Mrs. Bennett, Malcolm said, cutting through her sentence, your daughter has held controlling authority through the foundation since Evelyn Lawson's estate was settled. At the sound of my grandmother's name, my chest tightened. Grandma Evelyn's. The only person in my family who never called me dramatic when I was hurt. the only person who asked questions when Mom spoke for me, the only person who had once taken my hand after a family dinner and whispered, "One day, they won't get to decide who you are." Mom looked toward me through the glass panel. "You knew?" she asked. I didn't answer her. I looked at Lily. She was asleep again, her tiny fist resting against her cheek. Malcolm continued, each word controlled and clear. "Trisha chose not to disclose her role during admission because she requested standard patient treatment, but the policies you triggered today exist because she approved them." Mara looked at me then, and for the first time all day her expression softened. "The infant removal alert," Malcolm said, "the family coercion protocol, the protected patient response for postpartum, surgical and trauma recovery units, all of it was funded and enforced through the Foundation after Chairwoman Bennett's review." Mom's lips pressed together. Dad swallowed hard. Malcolm turned slightly toward the legal officer beside him. "Nurse Mara's first note did not label this as a family disagreement," he said. "It activated a protected patient protocol. When Mr. Bennett's documents were scanned, the system flagged a forged signature, an unauthorized chart access attempt, and a consent upload that was never approved." Dad's grip tightened around the empty folder. "That's not," he started. Hospital Legal stepped forward with a tablet. "The login used belonged to a temporary administrative account," she said. "The employee is already suspended pending investigation. We also have preliminary evidence of outside pressure connected to Mr. Bennett." Dad went grey. Mom's voice sharpened. "This is absurd, we are her parents." Mara stepped out from my room. "Her medical chart shows no psychiatric emergency," she said. "No incapacity finding. No authorization for either of you to remove the infant. Trisha clearly refused consent in front of 2 licensed nurses." Mom looked at me again, but the old confidence was gone. She was searching for the version of me that used to lower her eyes. "I didn't." She pressed a hand to her chest. "Trisha," she said, softer now, almost pleading, "we are your parents." I turned my head toward Lily, then back to my mother. "Then you should have protected me when I was weak," I said, "not tried to take my child." No one spoke after that. Security moved first. "Diane Bennett, Harold Bennett," one officer said. "You need to leave the maternity floor now." Mom looked around the hallway at the nurses, the resident, the visitors near the elevator, all the witnesses she had tried to use against me. None of them stepped forward for her. Dad tried one last time. "Malcolm, surely this can be handled privately." Malcolm's face didn't change. It became a legal matter the moment forged documents were presented and an infant removal was attempted. Security escorted them toward the elevator. Mom walked stiffly, chin high, but her hand shook against her purse strap. Dad kept his eyes down. The same hallway where they had called me unstable became the hallway where everyone watched them lose control. The reports were filed before the elevator doors closed. Hospital Legal documented attempted custodial interference, forged consent paperwork, unauthorized medical record access, and harassment of a recovering patient. CPS received everything: my verbal refusal, Mara and Nina's witness statements, the scanned documents, the failed consent upload, and the hallway recording of Mom's phone call. By that evening, the story had already moved beyond the hospital. Mom's church committee removed her from the family outreach board after learning she had tried to take a newborn from her recovering daughter under false claims. Dad's business partners distanced themselves once his name became tied to pressure on hospital staff and forged paperwork. The reputation they had spent years polishing became the first thing to crack. The financial damage came next. I froze every account they had used to claim influence over me. The foundation board barred them from hospital events, donor meetings, and administrative access. The employee who helped them lost his position pending the investigation. I stayed in the hospital 2 more days. Not because I was unstable. Because my body needed time to heal. Mara still checked on me every shift she worked. She never treated me like a victim or a name on a foundation document. She just adjusted Lily's blanket, checked my vitals and said, "You're doing fine, Trisha." Before discharge, Malcolm made sure the protective order request was filed. Diane and Harold were not allowed near me, near Lily, or near the maternity floor again. Weeks later, I carried my daughter into my apartment with slow steps and both hands around her car seat. The place was quiet. No one criticized how I held her. No one corrected the temperature of the room. No one stood over my shoulder waiting for me to prove I was failing. Sunlight stretched across the nursery floor. Lily slept beneath a soft yellow blanket, making the same tiny breathy sounds she made in the hospital. Beside her crib, I placed one framed photo of Grandma Evelyn. I touched the edge of the frame and whispered, "You were right." Protection had arrived late. But it had arrived. And this time it stayed. Diane came to the hospital to take my daughter, but she walked out having lost control of me forever.